Hi everyone, I'm back. Yay! So today I'm going to jump right in instead of letting myself talk forever, which if you know me well, I can talk for a long, long time. But if you listen to chapter 1 of Frindle and learned a little bit more about Nick, our main character, today we're jumping in and we're going to learn about Mrs. Granger. I thought about like dressing up as Miss Granger, but well, once you learn about her, I'm not really sure I have anything in my closet that will follow this. But I do have a lot of respect for Miss Granger. I'm going to say that right now. Chapter 2. If you happen to have this book at home or following along, we're starting at chapter 2, page 6 today. Mrs. Granger. 5th grade was different. So in the first chapter, we learned about Nick's shenanigans in 3rd and 4th grade. Today, we're moving on to 5th grade. 5th grade was different. This was the year to get ready for middle school. 5th grade meant passing classes. It meant no more morning recess. It meant letter grades on your report cards. But most of all, it meant Miss Granger. There were about 150 kids in 5th grade, and there were about 7 5th grade teachers. 2 math, 2 science, 2 social studies, but only 1 language arts teacher. In language arts, Mrs. Granger had a monopoly and a reputation. Mrs. Granger lived alone in a tidy little house in the older part of town. She drove an old pale blue car to school every morning. Rain or shine, snow or sleet, hail or wind, she had a perfect attendance record that stretched back farther than anyone could remember. Her hair was almost white, swept away from her face and up into something like a nest on the back of her head. So I'm picturing this perfect little bun right at the back of her head. Unlike some of the younger women teachers, she never wore pants to school. She always had 2 skirt and jacket outfits, her gray uniform and her blue uniform, which she always wore over a white shirt and a little cameo pin at the neck. So like she had a little pin right there, decorative. And Miss Granger was one of those people who never sweats. It had to be over 90 degrees before she even took off that jacket. She was small, as teachers go. There were even some 5th graders who were taller, but Miss Granger seemed like a giant. It was her eyes that did it. They were this dark gray, and if you turn them on full power, they can make you feel like a speck of dust. Her eyes could twinkle and laugh too, and kids said that she could crack really funny jokes. But it wasn't the jokes that made her famous. Everyone was sure that Mrs. Granger had X-ray vision. Don't even think about chewing a piece of gum within 50 feet of her. If you did, Miss Granger could see you and catch you and make you stick that gum on a bright yellow index card, and then she would safety pin the card to the front of your shirt, and you'd have to wear it for the rest of the school day. After that, you had to take it home and have your mom or dad sign the card and bring it back to Miss Granger the next day. And it didn't matter to Miss Granger if you weren't in 5th grade, because the way she saw it, sooner or later, you would be. Oh my gosh, could you imagine? Like an index card with your gum stuck to it. You'd have to wear it all day. Oh my goodness. Kind of reminds me of that book that it's called Be a Perfect Person in Just 3 Days. Some of you are saying, oh, I remember when he wore the broccoli around his neck. Right. If you haven't read that book, that's another suggestion. All the kids at Lincoln Elementary School knew that at the end of the line, 5th grade, Miss Granger would be the one grading their spelling tests and their reading tests, and worst of all, their vocabulary tests, week after week, month after month. Every language arts teacher in the world enjoys making kids use the dictionary. Check your spelling, check that definition, check those syllable breaks. But Miss Granger didn't just enjoy the dictionary. She loved the dictionary, almost worshipped it. Her weekly vocabulary list was 35 words long, sometimes longer. 35 vocabulary words on a week, guys, on a week. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Sorry. If you have been in my class or you are in my class now, you will know, and you're probably cheering saying, oh, Miss Christopher's favorite app. Someone tell me if you remember my favorite app. I'm not going to tell you now. As if that wasn't bad enough, there was a word of the day on the blackboard every morning. If you gave yourself a day off and didn't write one down and look it up and learn the definition, sooner or later, Miss Granger would find out, and then just for you, there would be 2 words of the day for a whole week. I'm going to show you a picture of Miss Granger. Miss Granger loved the dictionary. Okay, so here she is. There she is in her white hair and her bun and her perfect suit. And oh, there's the dictionary. Like, look at the time. What does it say? It says use the dictionary. All right. Miss Granger kept a full set of 30 dictionaries on a shelf in the back of her room, but her pride and joy was one of those huge dictionaries that with every word in the universe in it, the kind of that it takes two kids to carry. It sat on its own table at the front of her classroom, sort of like the altar in front of a church. I'm pretty sure that we have one of those at Gower West and by the desk, and many of you go through it as we come up there. Every graduate of Lincoln Elementary School for the past 35 years could remember standing at that table listening to Miss Granger's battle cry, "Look it up! That's why we have a dictionary!" Even before the school year started, when it was still the summer before 5th grade for Nick and his friends, Miss Granger was already busy. Every parent of every new 5th grader got a letter from her. Nick's mom read part of it out loud during dinner one night in August. Every home is expected to have a good dictionary in it so that each student can do his or her work properly. Good spelling and good grammar and good word skills are essential for every student. Clear thinking requires a command of the English language, and 5th grade is the ideal time for every girl and boy to acquire an expanded vocabulary. And then there was the list of the dictionaries that Miss Granger thought would be acceptable for home study. Mrs. Allen said, "It's so nice to have a teacher who takes her work this seriously." Nick groaned and tried to enjoy the rest of his hamburger, but even watermelon for dessert didn't cheer him up much. Nick had no particular use for the dictionary. I mean, he liked words a lot and he was good at using them, but he figured that he got all the words he needed just by reading, and he read all the time. When Nick ran into a word he didn't know, he asked his brother or his dad or whoever was handy what it meant, and if they knew, they'd tell him. But not Miss Granger. He had heard all about her, and he had seen 5th graders in the library last year, noses stuck in their dictionaries, frantically trying to finish their vocabulary sheets before English class. It was still a week before school, and Nick already felt like 5th grade was going to be a very long year. I think so. I'm going to go into the next chapter. We're going to do one more. Chapter 3, The Question. Dun dun. I feel like we need a dun dun dun. The first day of school was always a get acquainted day. Books were passed out and there were a lot of chatter. Everyone asked, "What did you do over the summer?" Periods 1 through 6 went by very smoothly for Nick. But then came period 7. Mrs. Granger's class was all business. The first thing they did was take a vocabulary pre-test to see how many of the 35 words for the week the kids already knew. Tremble, circular, orchestra. The list went on and on. Nick knew most of them. Then there was a handout about class procedures. After that, there was a review paper about cursive writing, and then there was a sample sheet showing how the heading should look on every assignment. No let up for 37 minutes straight, just on and on and on. Nick was an expert at asking the delaying question, also known as the teacher stopper or the guaranteed time waster. At 3 minutes before the bell, in that split second between the end of today's classwork and the announcement of tomorrow's homework, Nick could launch a question guaranteed to sidetrack this teacher long enough to delay or even wipe out the homework assignment. Timing was important, but asking the right question, that was the hard part. Questions about stuff in the news, questions about the college the teacher went to, questions about the teacher's favorite book or sport or hobby. Nick knew all the tricks, and he had been very successful in the past. Here, he was in 5th grade near the end of his very first language arts class with Mrs. Granger, and Nick could feel a homework assignment coming the way a farmer can feel a rainstorm. It's the first day of school. Miss Granger paused to catch her breath, and Nick's hand shot up. She glanced down at her seating chart, and then up at him, and then her sharp gray eyes were not even turned up to half power. "Yes, Nicholas." "Mrs. Granger, you have so many dictionaries in this room, and that huge one especially. Where do all those words come from? Did they just get copied from other dictionaries?" It sure is a big book. It was a perfect thought grenade. Kapow! Several kids smiled, and a few peeked at the clock. Nick was famous for this, and the whole class knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, so did Miss Granger. She hesitated for a moment, gave Nick a smile that was just too sweet to be real. Her eyes were the color of a thundercloud. Why, what an interesting question, Nicholas. I could talk about that for hours. I bet. She glanced around the classroom. Do the rest of you want to know too? Everyone nodded. Yes. Very well then. Nicholas, will you do some research on that subject and give a little oral report to the class? If you find out the answer yourself, it will mean so much more to you than if I just told you. Please have your report ready for our next class. Miss Granger smiled at him again, very sweetly, and then it was back to business. Now, the homework for tomorrow can be found on page 12 of your Words Alive book. Nick barely heard the assignment. His heart was pounding and he felt small, very small. He could feel the tops of his ears growing red. A complete shutdown. An extra assignment. And probably a little black mark next to his name on the seating chart. Everything he had heard about this teacher was true. Don't mess around with the Lone Granger. Now, what are you thinking? I mean, here he's been successful so much, and here she just went right back at him, right? She shot him down. So and this is first day of school, right? So yeah, he's in for it. I gotta see. What do you think? Tell me. I'll talk to you soon.